afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you're able to see us or see myself and also see the screen. Welcome to our BTS Sparking Conversations webinar for April. For those who may not know, a quick introduction, I'm Sean Slade, one of the two co-heads of education at BTS Spark for North America. The other co-head, Alyssa Gallagher, is on our the chat function today. She's based over in Los Angeles, and I'm based over in the DC area. This is going to be an interesting and fun conversation today. It's a follow-up to one that we actually hosted last month as well, about leading into and for the future of education. As most of you are probably experts at the moment, we are doing this over Zoom. One nice thing they've changed over the last couple of months is you're actually able to make the screen bigger or smaller depending on what your preference is. So you can make the speaker's gallery view and you can hide the slides, or you can make the slides the main thing, really up to you. We will be taking some Q&A. So please use the Q&A function as it is on Zoom, and also use the chat function. So let people know where you're from, and if you have a question, we will be getting to those towards the end of the webinar. But I think by now we're all pretty much, after 18 months, 2 years, we're all pretty much experts at Zoom, although we do tend to make some gaffes every now and then. Like I said, this is really a follow-up to last month's conversation. Last month we had a group of, well, for want of a better word, thought leaders, futurists, talking about leading into and for the future. And a lot of that was really insightful and engaging, but we also want to hear from school leaders about what they believe is needed leading into the future, and also what they felt about some of the remarks and comments made last month. What's practical, what's not practical. This conversation came out of an article that we posted up on EdWeek. And the article, as you can see there, is entitled "The World is Always Uncertain, How Should Education Leaders Respond?" And what we did was we asked some of our thought leaders and futurists and some of our school leaders what they thought. Because we often talk about the future as in a destination to get there, but as we've seen over the last couple of years, this path towards the future can change, and things might get thrown in our way that we need to adjust to. So what we'd like to discuss today is really, what are those leadership skills that will be needed in the future? You know, the pandemic has shown that we need to be rather quick and nimble as these things come to the fore. But we also need to start to have different mindsets, maybe not just always following the school improvement plan or the 5-year process, but maybe we need to actually develop some skills where people inside the school or inside the district are able to make some decisions that really suit their students and their teachers and their communities. If anybody hasn't seen last month's webinar, we did have some great guests with Homer Tavangar and Will Richardson from the Big Questions Institute, Jose Vilson from EduColor, Catherine Prince from Knowledge Works. They put out their education forecasting, and their last one came out last month, and Mark Sparvel over at Microsoft. It was a really engaging conversation. If you go to our BTS Spark YouTube page, you can see a recording of that and a recording of every webinar we've done since we started these back in June of last year. Now, what they said last month, there were probably 3 main themes that came out. One that was really brought out by Homer and Will was the fact that the future is already here. And really, the last 2 years of schooling and education have shown that we are currently in a VUCA, a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world right now. And if we didn't feel comfortable for whatever reason over the last 2 years, we're going to have to start to learn ways to become more comfortable in this uncertainty. Because like Will was saying as well, the job description of what the school leader does nowadays has changed. It's changed in the last 6 months. It's changed in the last 18 months. It's definitely changed from what it was 2 or 3 years past. But there was also a fairly unanimous consensus that we do, and by the we I mean people who are stakeholders in education, we do need to start to play a bigger role in what we want in this future. Because if we don't start to step in and seize the momentum at the moment, there will be others coming into this space and they will take the opportunity. So we do need to start thinking about how can we reorganize our schools, rethink our schools. And one of the nice things about, well, there aren't many nice things, but one of the few nice things about what we've been through over the last 2 years is the fact that it has allowed people to take a step back, maybe to reconsider what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then the last theme that came up, and Mark Sparvel mentioned this, is we need to be clear on whose future we're talking about, because when we start to plan for the future or talk about the future, we can very often have a very monolithic view of that, or a blinkered view. We need to be aware of the diversity across our communities, across our country, across the world. We need to understand the diversity of those communities and of the students in those communities and what their needs are, because not every need is the same. We're going to see if we can swing back to some of these themes during the conversation. But to take us into this conversation, we've got what I've been promised is a very noisy, rowdy group of district and school leaders with us. I'd like to introduce Dr. Rosa Perez-Isaiah. She is the Director of Elementary Education, Equity and Access in Norwalk, La Miranda in California, and she serves students for 28 years, passionate about equity, social justice, multilingual education, the whole child, founder of We Lead Ed, and We Lead Ed BAM Radio. So welcome, Rosa.
Thank you for having me, and I am delighted to be here with you today.
And that's okay. We love to have you with us as well. We also have Dr. Adam File, who's the Director of Technology and Media Services for Newton County School System in Covington, Georgia. He's a former high school science teacher, currently serving as the Director of Technology and Media Service in Georgia. And since Adam got his first laptop in college, he's been hooked. And as you can see, Adam is also blessing us with, what do we call that? An e-screen? An e-glass. E-glass. So he's going to be doing probably some wild, unique things on that e-glass, which is will be fun to watch as well. So welcome, Adam.
Happy to be here, and I bring you greetings from the Hollywood of the South, also known as Covington, Georgia. So, you know, if you like Hallmark movies, Marvel movies, they're probably filmed in my backyard. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. This is going to be a fun chat, I can tell. We also have Dr. Sane Bell, who's was the Executive Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning in Katy, Texas, up until a couple of weeks ago, and now she's the Assistant Superintendent. She serves also with the Future Ready Schools, a project of the Alliance for Education, All for Ed, and there's a number of publications, including Be Excellent, On Purpose, Intentional Strategies for Impactful Leadership. So welcome, Sane.
Thank you. Glad to be here amongst this wonderful group of leaders.
And finally, last but not least, we have the only second non-doctor of this panel. Both Tom and myself are still waiting in for our PhDs in the mail. Mine's taking a little longer than expected. It's been 10 plus years and it hasn't arrived yet. I don't know when you're expecting yours, Tom. Are you, is yours coming soon, next week or two?
I'm still waiting in the mail, but it has not shown up yet. So I don't think so, Sean.
But we better get onto the US Postal Service and sort out what's happening. Anyway, Tom is the Director of Innovation for the Future Ready Schools, part of All for Ed. He serves as a regular conference keynoter and was named as one of the 20 to watch by NSBA. He's also a thought leader and best-selling author with some books from ASCD as well. So welcome, Tom.
Thanks for having me. And clearly when pulling this together, I picked 3 Future Ready advisors that were far smarter than I was. So I'm here to just bring it down for the common folk, for the rest of us, because these 3 brilliant practitioners that we brought together today are 3 of the best. Proud to call them friends and happy to join y'all today.
That's great. We need someone to bring it down and translate it to the layman level. So glad you could play that role, Tom. All right, what we are going to do is, these are generally discussions that we have, but to make sure that you know, Tom Murray doesn't hog the microphone for the whole hour, we want to give everybody at least 1 minute on the stage to say their piece. So the way that we started is really to ask people on the panel, what does this phrase mean to you, leading into and for the future? And I'm going to ask the first question. We have 1 minute to do it. I'm going to get Rosa to give the first response.
No pressure, Sean.
No pressure.
It's an excellent question. When I think about leading into and for the future, I think of balancing reality with optimism. Things have been a challenge for especially the last couple of years with the impacts of COVID. Now we're starting on a journey in addressing the future of those impacts. But a leader needs to keep that in mind, to understand the reality of the challenge while staying optimistic and preparing for opportunities for change. And we're really at the crossroads. If there's ever a time for us to change the way we do things, this is it. So that's what I think about when I think about that phrase.
No, wonderful. It's really, I agree. It's being aware enough to understand what the reality is. But to be honest, I think almost everybody who is in education is a bit of an optimistic, glass half full kind of person. And you need to show where that path is leading, the most optimistic or one of the most optimistic journeys that people can take. One thing I didn't warn you about, Rosa, is you have a little changing background slide. So when it changes from white to blue or blue to white, that's roughly about when your minute is up. But you timed it to perfection. All right, let's turn it over to Adam. 1 minute.
You know, really, when I look at this phrase, I internalize it as we can't go back to normal. So when I look at leading for the future, that's really what it means. This whole time period over the past 3 years has really given us a chance to look at not only what's happening in our districts, but what's happening for us personally as citizens of this planet, of this country, and really look at how can we take what we've learned and move forward with it. So what we had in our school systems didn't work for everybody. So we have to keep that in mind as we're talking about leading into and for the future. So my thing is we can't go backwards. We have to take what we've learned and move forward and take those strategies and try to make it more engaging for everybody, for all learners, for all stakeholders. So really moving forward with that and not trying to go back to what we had prior to the shutdown and all this stuff, because it didn't work. We have to be real with that. It didn't work for everybody. We found some things that worked and some things that didn't work, but we have to take those and continue to innovate and create safe spaces for all of our students.
I couldn't agree more. And maybe I run in the wrong circles, but what I do hear in education is I hear most people saying that. Hear most people saying we can't go back. What was behind us didn't work. We need to take this opportunity. Sane, what do you think?
So, what really resonates with me is that the skill sets that I had as a leader prior to the pandemic really are somewhat obsolete to the skills that I need now post-pandemic. And recognizing that crisis situations are not singular events. Before, we maybe would deal with a school crisis, a singular event that would, you had a playbook for it, or if you didn't know, someone else that you knew had experienced it. And so they could kind of give you some tips and some ways to navigate the system. Now with this new scene that we're in, it's about re-examining the skill set that you currently have, finding those areas where you need to grow as you lead into the future, anticipating and expecting more crisis events, more uncertainty, but then also those same skill sets that we have to evaluate and adjust as leaders. We need to make sure that we're teaching those skill sets to the children that we are charged with leading as well, because just as we're preparing to lead into the future, our job is to make sure that they are prepared to lead into their unknown as well. So I think it's just really a time to no longer be problem solvers, but be problem finders and look for areas in your organization that didn't work for all students prior to the pandemic. Identify those now and identify areas that you need to address and look forward as this next crisis, whatever that may be, is going to come. We need to make sure that we're ready for that.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more. And it's also about trialing out, as we've actually done over the last 2 years, trying out new things and see if they work. And then the bits that do work, we'll continue to do those. The bits that didn't work, let's leave them aside and try something else. So it's not just having, again, this monolithic way of doing things, but various ways of doing things. Tom, let's hear from you.
So before we look into the future, I want to take a step back and look in the past. I think we all saw the memes back in 2020 that said, in 2015, those people that answered, where do you see yourself in 5 years, all got the answer wrong, right? Because when we think about leading into the future, we automatically think about vision and those things, but life happens. A number of years ago, I wrote a blog called The Ways of Great Leadership. And it wasn't W-A-Y-S, it was W-A-Z-E, Waze, the app, the social driving app. So the analogy that I'll make very quickly is certainly needing that vision as to where we're going. If not, we just find ourselves spinning wheels. We find a lot of that frustration, but we also want to leverage all the information possible. And if you use the Waze app, it tells you more than where the police are, right? Not that I use it for that purpose, but it gives you lots of information from other factors and others, other people that are out there giving you constant information, and you navigate based on the information but still having your end on that your eyes on the end goal. So that agility is really, really important. And so when we think about leading into and for the future, to me, it's also about that flexibility, that agility, finding ways that we'll dive into here in this webinar to do what's needed in those moments with an understanding, going back to what Rosa said about a hope of what can be.
Yeah, exactly. And to use your Waze analogy as well, it's about you knowing roughly where you're going, but you're getting real-time data and making real-time decisions on about how you move around it or how you change direction or whether even you sort of, change where you're heading as an end goal as well. All right. We're going to jump.
I love that analogy right there, Tom, because even with the Waze app, it lets you know whether it's okay to not leave right now. Because sometimes all routes are going to take you too long to get there. So it's better just to sit tight for a little bit, wait for traffic to die down, and then hit the road. So yeah, you definitely got to use that.
Yeah. And how many times do you see the word like recalculating pop up, right? Like maybe I should go back to the drawing board on this one, but using all that information, I think, is super important.
But what's smart as well to carry that on is that even if you think about the way that the Waze app or the maps have evolved over the last 5 years, previously, if you got lost, it would say recalculating, 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 and it wouldn't give you an answer. It would just say, I'm thinking about what to do next. What they do now is they actually tell you before something comes up, they give you advice and ideas. Oh, this is coming up in 10 minutes. You may want to change and do this and do that. And so I like the analogy. Let's jump into the first question. And we're basically trying to answer two questions in this discussion, and we'll see how deep and how complex we get. But the first of those questions, which we had in the article as well, is asking about what the skills and mindsets are that our school leaders will need to lead us into the future. Now, just to summarize what we're meaning by that, it's what are the skills required by leaders to be able to adjust, to be that Waze platform or program or app that can make decisions in real time without having to rely on, going back to the central office or going back to the Department of Education to get your advice. So what are those skills that we're going to need leaders to be great at as we lead into the future? And I'm going to open this up to all of you. So someone take the charge.
I think I'll jump in with this one. I think about the kind of leader that I need, and I know it's someone who is not only proficient in data analysis and data guidance and all of those technical pieces of someone who leads others, but it is really important for me to lead with transparency, to lead with clear communication, during a time of crisis or during crisis leadership. I think it's important to be really strong with those foundational basic skills, and that will require empathy, that will require flexibility, that will require strong listening skills, that will require the ability to attract the minds and the focus of an organization. And part of that is being able to stay focused yourself, to be focused in the crisis mode, because there are so many things coming at us right now at a time when we want to create changes, when we can't go back, as Adam mentioned. Go back to what? Go back to what didn't work for many of our students and many of our staff. That's not an option. So the ability to have those strong, soft skills and to balance that with those strong, basic leadership tools that we all should have in our toolboxes.
I'm going to just add to that. I'm sorry, Sean.
Go ahead.
Let me just add to that, because I think it's so important. The self-awareness piece that Rosa mentioned is vital. And those soft skills used to be those things that were like, yeah, those are good to have, but you need to be competent. You can be competent and not have those soft skills and you won't get anything done. And so being able to communicate clearly, that clarity piece, and being candid, being able to say, what the reality is, but here's our plan to move forward is important. And then most importantly, being empathetic and being able to recognize where people are, understanding that they don't check their baggage, their personal baggage at the door when they come into the workplace setting, and everything that's going on environmentally in the world also impacts the way that we work and how we engage with each other. And that empathy grows by amplifying the voice of those you serve, those you work alongside with. And so making sure that you're talking to the people who are engaged in the work, the people who are the recipients of the work that is being enacted in your organization, amplifying the voice of all your students, your community, those working alongside you will help you be really strategic in ensuring that you're working on the right work that's needed for your organization. And it'll help you to block out the noise and to stay focused, as Rosa mentioned. So I just think those are some critical skill sets that, you know, when I think back to when I was in principal school 20 years ago, we didn't talk about those things in principal school. And so now it goes back to that resetting of the essential critical skills that are needed to lead into the future and to realize our impact on how the future is created through the skills that we have right now.
And if I can, like when I look at this shift, and this is kind of going back with that we can't go back mentality that I mentioned earlier, the virtual learning that our students had was the worst virtual learning that they should ever experience. It should only get better. It's kind of like when I give my son, he's 5 years old right now. If I gave him my iPhone 13, this should be the worst iPhone he ever uses because it's only going to get better. So when you start talking about this mindset, our educators have to realize that the brick and mortar school system that we are accustomed to has to change. It has to evolve. Otherwise, we're going to become left behind. When you start talking about different aspects that are out there, whether it's charter schools, whether it's private schools, whatever the case may be, you're going to see some better virtual options available for our students. And if we don't get on board and create a better, more viable option for our students as it relates to technology and being able to have that 24/7, anytime, anywhere access, then we're going to get left behind, because there's no reason why a kid in rural Georgia shouldn't be able to take Japanese. Because we say, oh, we can't get a Japanese teacher out here. That's bull. With technology now, we should be able to allow our students to have whatever courses they want to have, whatever foreign language they want to take, whatever AP level course they want to take. So we have to have leaders that have that mindset to say, okay, how can I change and revolutionize my space to make it the most exciting, the most engaging, the most challenging learning environment for not only for our students, but for our parents. So really engaging everyone in this learning process is where our educators, where our mindset has to be on how can we take this to revolutionize and change it. And in that process, we're going to fail. So we have to be able to embrace that failure, but learn from that, because you can't keep doing the same thing and you're going to get some horrible results. You have to learn from those mistakes, take that and move forward with it. So those are that mindset that I think educators need to have as we start moving forward.
Yeah, well said, Adam. And I'll take your, why can't a rural student in Georgia take, a foreign language that's not offered there, and say, districts have been doing that for well over a decade. And so when we think about the leadership side of it, it's recognizing that the world is a lot bigger than your school district boundaries. And we need to look outside it to recognize the greatness that's happening in other places. We had students in the district, we had a virtual program taught by public school teachers with our own content over 10 years ago in the district that I was in, we had students that took Mandarin Chinese from teachers in China and were able to take 4 sections of that for exactly what you're talking about. Now, I give my former superintendent and their vision a lot of credit related to that, not looking for credit myself there. I give her and our teachers in that program a lot of credit there. But when we think about the mindsets of leadership, part of it is recognizing there's greatness happening throughout the world, truly. How do we benefit and get ourselves out of the sand sometimes, our own heads out of the sand, to look around to see some of those things that are already happening? I'm going to build on that as well and say, when we think about leadership skill sets, also around humility. Humility to me is huge, in recognizing, because it goes along with what I was just trying to say, and that recognizing, yes, your cabinet team is incredibly strong. Yes, your principal teams has a lot of experience, but so does the district next door. So does the district the state away, or whatever it might be, to be able to connect there. And so I think that sense of humility, to recognize there is no point of arrival, that your point A to your point B is going to be your district's journey or your school's journey. And we should also be really proud of that. But I think humility also allows us to decenter ourselves. And when we take a look, I think one of the skill sets is the ability to decenter yourself. We all have our own lens. We all have our own experience, but recognize we come at it it with one lens or experience, it's not inherently bad. It's all we know. It's all we have. But when we decenter ourselves, to go back to, I believe it was Rosa shared, or might have been Sine, had shared the idea of voices of others, and to make sure that other voices are heard. And that's such a vital aspect of leadership, because it's real easy. Leadership, a good friend of mine, Jimmy Costas, often talks about leadership's not a committee of one. And how do we amplify a lot of those voices? I also agree. I believe it was both Sine and Rosa mentioned the word empathy. How do we make sure as leaders, and they certainly go hand in hand, in my opinion, with humility and some of the things I reference, but empathy is so key. Empathy to understand so many of the students that are coming in each day face life that's completely different than maybe as I did as a school leader. Many of the students maybe that may be living in poverty, maybe a different situation than I'm currently in as the principal or as the superintendent. How do we have empathy? You know, I'm also reminded often, sometimes we'll say that analogy of like to put somebody else's shoes on. One of my best friends, a guy named Ken Shelton, often talks about how the pushback to that is, but you get to take those shoes off. And so when we think about leadership, how do we have true empathy through raising those voices, that community involvement to bring those pieces together? And also I'll throw out there the ability to truly listen. I think so many times as leaders, we're in positions where we're listening to respond instead of listening to understand. And to me, that's two different skill sets. And so I think the ability to listen is really key when we talk about leadership.
Tom, you probably, you actually jumped ahead, and I was going to raise the idea about humility, but you jumped ahead and answered my second question I was going to pose. We actually put out a white paper a year or so ago called Messy Leadership, and it's how leaders, both in education but also the private sector, how they actually thrived to a certain point during the pandemic. And the biggest difference was the leaders who put aside their ego, asked for help, said, I don't know, actually built the team around them, because as opposed to being that captain of the ship that says, follow me, I know the answer, they were able to say, I'm unsure, and that allowed others to come in with those answers. So that humility, that's really key.
Sean and Tom, I wanted to add to this as you were speaking, Tom. I was thinking about the fact that many of us who are in especially central office roles, we've been doing this for a while. So I said, this is my 28th year. And what I see around me is I see trying to tackle new challenges with parameters that we've used for the last 20 years. And that's a challenge. Who is leading the leaders? We are busy leading our principal teams, our admin teams, our teacher teams, but how are we getting that information that pushes us out and away from tapping into our old habits, our old way of doing things that we know is a system that is designed in many instances to be inequitable to large groups of students and staff. And I find that to be a big challenge, because it's easy in these roles to say, oh, I get it. Let me do what I need to do. And really, we're using an old mindset to try to tackle a new era of issues. And I haven't seen such a tremendous focus on those necessary skills. I don't like calling them soft skills. I really do think it's the necessary skills. And that is that, like I mentioned, the communication piece, the empathy piece, this idea that people come first in whatever we do. Leading for equity and access for everyone. We can't keep doing the same things and saying that we're being innovative and reinventing ourselves, but how do we get that new thinking to leaders who have led for a while? And that includes myself.
And Rosa, if I can add to that, and this is one of those things that right now we're in the middle of an election year. Midterms. And so to that point with leadership, it's really great for me to write these really nice quotes and things here, or tweet something out, or have hashtags and all this fun stuff. And that's not even part of a leader, being a leader, but we do it all the time anyway. But we run into this space now where education has always been political, but even more so now, where you're now having spaces here in Georgia, for example, they're putting legislation out there for us to now give parents the right to say what parts of the internet their kid can get to, because I may not want my kid to go to here or there. So even with all these things happening, as a leader, you have to also be able to stand firm to that equity component for when someone's saying that you're being political in nature, when you're trying to be equitable to your students. I forgot who said this, so I'm stealing that quote. Whoever said it, if you hear me, I'm giving you credit, but I'm using it right now. When they were talking about equity, they were saying it's similar to having children. And if you have one child that needs braces, you're not going to put braces on all your kids. You're going to put braces on the kid that need it. That's equitable. And you're not going to turn around and spend $3,000 on the other kid because you spent $3,000 on braces on that kid. No, you're going to give them what they need. If they don't need braces or glasses or anything, they're not getting anything. That's equity in a nutshell, but we've gotten so politicized with a lot of this stuff and this mindset that leaders have to have about not upsetting the wrong group, because they don't want to have that crazy board meeting that's going to end up on the news or be in the next SNL skit. So we have to also think about being a leader, that mindset of knowing you're going to take some lumps and bumps in this process, but if you're doing what's best for the boys and girls, the children, and the community, then you're doing the right work. And you're going to have a little courage when it comes to that stuff.
Adam, I'm shocked you brought up the election living in Georgia. I can't imagine that happens to be in your local news there at all, right? You know, Adam, one of the things to joke here, you mentioned the braces example, and I just paid for my daughter's braces, which brings up the financial piece. So I actually want to put another aspect on this related to mindset and skills that leaders need into the future, and that's around sustainability. You know, when I look in the US, and I know there's folks that are outside the US here in this webinar, but in the US, the federal government's given more money in this influx of funds for COVID relief money truly than ever before. This one time over 3 years, this massive lump of money districts are getting. My fear is the funding cliff we're going to have in 3 years if leaders don't have the sustainability lens moving forward. A lot of folks hiring people with those funds. And if we're hiring past the 3-year mark where those funds are run out, we are going to be in a massive issue with a massive financial cliff if we're not capable. We're buying lots of stuff. You know, COVID forced us to buy a lot of additional devices, hotspots, and those kinds of things. And if we're signing on that purchase order without simultaneously asking 4 years from now, when these brand new devices or whatever it is, 4 years or so, and these brand new devices are dead, where does the money come to replace them? Leadership will stumble very quickly without a true sustainability plan. And I know it's a lot easier said than done, because I recognize, you know, state funding's influx, title funding's influx, ARP funding, you know, are we really sure the state's going to give us this amount of money? And so a lot of times we're making our best guess or best estimate when it comes out to budget season, which we're in now, right? And so when we think about all those different pieces, the sustainability of it all, and constantly asking, what does this look like 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, is a really vital aspect of a mindset and skill set for leadership into the future.
You know, Tom, that makes me think of, and Tom has heard me talk about this, technical challenges and adaptive challenges. And so often in education, we use technical solutions to fix adaptive challenges, which is why we keep having the same issue over and over and over again. Buying devices and putting them in the hands of students, that's a technical challenge. It's the matter of getting a PO, ordering some devices, and here you go. But it does not automatically transfer the learning experiences for students. That adaptive work, that unlearning, that relearning, that monitoring the progress along the way to adjust. I have a new kind of acronym. We need to be on par. We need to be precise with the strategies that we're implementing. We need to stop speaking in terms of these big education fluff words and know that we have a finite amount of time to really, number one, utilize these funds in a way that will have impact on the students that we are serving. We need to take action. So specific strategies, not things that sound nice and we're still trying to figure out down the road, like, what do we really mean by that? Through our precise prescriptive action, we need to be able to make adjustments quickly. And then we need to repeat. and we don't have 3 to 5 years in strategic planning to figure out what's going to work best for our students. And so just understanding how to address the two types of challenges that we face in leading schools and leading districts, and making sure that we are prescribing the right solution to those challenges is something that we have got to get good at as educators.
Yeah, well said. And to be honest, I think, well, one thing that came up when you were all talking as well was keeping that vision and keeping that goal, and really understanding and articulating what we want to get out of education, what we want our students to get out of education is really key for that. These are some quotes that came up in the article, and we've actually touched on many or most of them as well. We could probably keep the whole hour just discussing that first question, but I am going to move us along a little bit because I want to hear if there's anything different if we start asking what are some of the skills that we are going to need for the future. So we've talked about having a goal, we've talked about visioning, we've talked about the communication skills. Are there any different skills or mindsets that we're going to need for the future so our students are ready in the year 2030, 2040, 2050?
I'm going to connect this to something Tom said. We're going to need self-efficacy, advocacy skills. And I say this because you're right, Tom, we received a ton of funding that it's a dang shame that we were not prepared for, because never in a million years did I ever imagine we'd have this much funding, which is sad in itself. But now that we do have limited funding, temporary funding, we were not prepared. We don't have staff to fill positions. We don't have people who want to go into the field of education. We don't have therapists to address the mental health impact that our students are dealing with right now, and our staffs are dealing with. So that advocacy, that understanding of the big picture is an important skill for the future. Empowering our students, teaching them what they can do to voice. Our students have voices, our community have voices. We don't provide platforms for that to happen. And oftentimes our leaders are not equipped to make that happen as well. But I was making that connection between what you said, because I just had a conversation with someone in California. At least we've never had this much money in my 28 years. And here we are, and we can't fill the gaps. We don't have the people available to do that. And that should not be the exception. That should be the norm. The expectation is that we continue to have this funding for our students, and that there is no other way to do it. And that we create programs to prepare people to come into these roles for our students. So empowerment, self-efficacy, advocacy skills, I think are really needed for future success.
And I think with this, one thing to really look at, and I guess building off of what you were just saying there, with that, getting the parents and family members continue to have that involvement. I mentioned earlier in another panel I was on that I believe we have more connection now with our parents than we've ever had before due to technology. We've been having more parent conference meetings via Zoom, Google Meet, Hangouts, whatever you want to call it, than we've ever had before. So I think we really need to use that and really leverage more of that parent family communication, because we've had more that happen in the US than just COVID-19. You know, we've also had this whole racial awakening, if you will. We've had all these other things that have happened, and we have to really talk about that SEL piece. So you mentioned like staff members. we're having a hard time finding that piece. So we have kids that are dealing with all kinds of trauma that are coming in. So we're more informed about these things as an education system. We know this exists, but we don't have the proper staff to fill those bubbles to take care of those students. So we need to look at some better ways to really embrace our community, really partnering with them more and understanding what those issues, what those concerns that they have are. We have to get beyond the lip service and really put boots on grounds and really make those things happen. So when you're talking about the money and things that we've had that's there, I think we all can agree that's money we should have already had. You know, this is, if you look at like the money that was lost in schools from the recession till now, I don't think we still feel that gap that we got. So while we got a ton of money, if you divided that money out since 2006, it probably still would be a gap left from what we should have been getting back then. But we got all this money and it has to be spent. We still need this money. So one thing we have to also have as a school system and as leaders is an advocacy mindset to try to continue to get those resources. So yeah, we got them. We need to keep them, people. So all those people who sit in those big offices, sits under those domes and all those places, we need to keep that money. It's not hope. You gave it to us and we need to keep it because our kids are an important investment. So we need to put the money here because we can put it in wars overseas. We can put it in walls we want to build. We need to put it in our kids every single day in these classrooms.
Adam, I love that. Go ahead, jump in, Rosa.
I have to share something just really quickly. Adam, I'm so glad that you included that parent piece because I don't think we can be successful without that piece. But do we really want parent engagement? Do we really? Like, I see folks
we want it.
Opportunities to connect, but do we want parent engagement? Do we want to create opportunities for our parents to learn with us? We may want a rubber stamp, we may want a signature, but do we really want engagement? I don't think in many cases we do. And that is a critical piece to doing all of this. Parent voices are powerful. That's the last thing you want to hear at the district office is to get to have a group of parents at a board meeting or to get calls. So we really have to think about that. I am an advocate of parent engagement, not parent involvement, parent engagement. Come and learn with us so you can help us create changes.
That's one thing that I hate so that we do. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say we speak in terms of involvement and we speak engagement and use it interchangeably with involvement. But true parent engagement is partnering with our parents, listening to our parents, hearing their concerns, seeking to get on the same side of the table when we can. And when we can't, understanding their perspective. It's not you're right, I'm wrong, but realizing that we serve our community. And so our parents are a vital part of that. And we have to get away from this side versus that side when it comes to we want you, but only when you want to go along with how we want you to engage. And so just really putting on that critical ear and listening. And there are some things that will be challenging, but as leaders, we have to remember who we're serving, still standing firm and being strong when it comes to supporting the needs of our students, but we can't just dismiss the engagement piece. When we switch to virtual learning, those walls of the schools that used to exist, those were shattered. They came down, and we probably have more involvement in some cases and more engagement in other cases because of that. And so that is a different response that we have to have when it comes to what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that really mean in our current time?
So one of the pieces that I'll reference here, at Future Ready Schools in our framework, one of our gears is community partnerships. And I actually like the word partnerships over the other two because it shows that both have an equal voice or say or whatever you want to at least look at there. And part of what I would make the connection to there, love the parent piece, but I would also say it goes far beyond that. And I'm sure we'd all recognize the places of worship in our communities, but also the businesses. One of the things is we go back to the question of skill sets and mindsets. One of the pieces that I really want to push is this notion of relevance. When we take a look into the future, how do we make sure the experiences that we're creating for students are remotely relevant for the world that they're living in and that they will live in? If our students at high school aren't having conversations about like things that are happening like with autonomous cars and those kinds of things, the world that they're going to work in is going to be dramatically different than the one that we're preparing them for. And so I think this relevance is really key. Some of the best things I see, in my opinion, happening around the country, some of these pathways that places are creating for students to try that world of work just a little bit. And if they say, hey, I don't want to do something in the medical field, I'd much rather learn that as a junior or senior in high school than go spend lots of money on it and realize that's not for me. So going from one pathway to another to get some real world experience in terms of some job experience and exploring their interests and their passions and their strengths. And so for me, going back to the question, mindsets around relevance, making sure that we're understanding ourselves, what's relevant in that world of work. One of the things at Future Ready Schools that we've also done is partnered with a group to be able to pull data from all the different states at the projections of the world of work over the coming years. And so how as school districts would we not look at, here's what's projected in our state, or even you can bring it down to our region in terms of where the jobs will exist. To me, that's relevance. It goes back to that notion of like, why are we learning this? Why are we learning this? To me, like that's a sign of one or two things to me. Number one, maybe it's a really good question and we should reanalyze some of the things we do. But second, it's a connection to not understanding the true purpose or the connection to life or to work or where that relevance is, right? And so I think that relevance is vital for school leaders in terms of mindset to create programming, to create opportunities that are going to be relevant for their world of work.
And then the other skill that was mentioned as well a little bit earlier on, which is my little stone in my shoe, is we talk about developing people ready for democracy, but you learn democracy by doing it, by going through the process, not by learning it from a book and learning about Congress and how many houses and how you pass a bill, but we need to allow our students to experience agency and empowerment and decision making in the safe environment of the school. We are going to run out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the audience to start submitting questions if they have them. And at the same time, I'm going to just put these up, the 3 themes that came out of last month's webinar around this, and just open up for discussion. The 3 themes were the fact that the future is here, that we do as educators need to play a role in shaping the future, or the discussion around whose future are we talking about. And so we'll give it a 2 or 3 minute little conversation and then turn to some questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think when you said the future is here, the biggest thing I think about is connectivity. For the longest, we've talked about connectivity as a K-12, a school system problem or issue. But one thing that we saw was abundantly clear: the infrastructure I know in the States and around the world, just not there for everyone to have that high speed access to do what they need to do. For me to see my doctor, I have to open up my phone and use an app, and I see my doctor on the phone. So if I don't have that connectivity piece, then I can't do what I need to do as far as my health. So I think that is that thing that we're really looking at, is how it's shaping and changing our world, that this whole internet thing is more than just, I need it for school. I need it to live. I need to turn my lights on in my house now. Those are those things that we're talking about. The future is here and it's only going to get better. As I mentioned earlier, we have the worst version of it right now. Each day, each year, it should be getting better. So we have to kind of have that mentality of what we're going to do to make it better in our spaces.
The one that jumps out to me is whose or which future. And so we are at a really, really critical time in our educational system where we knew things didn't work prior to the pandemic. The pandemic amplified those things even more, like this new awakening for those who didn't even know these things existed. To now, we have got to charge educators with being able to vision an equitable system. It has never existed, ever. And so when I see whose or which future, trying to employ, I think as Rosa said, some of these new strategies within the parameters that we had prior to the pandemic, it's not going to work. Like it's going to fail if we keep trying to force those things into the system that didn't work for all students before. And so when we think about whose or which future, we have got to really have conversations about putting things in place that have never existed, because we have not ever had an equitable system where all students got what they needed, not the majority, all students. And so that last one really speaks to me. We're at a crux in what that looks like, in creating that so that it is a reality for all of our students.
Exactly. We do have a question that's coming here from the audience. We have a couple, but probably time for one at the moment. The question is, what are your thoughts on whole systems approach to shaping the change that is needed?
I love that question. And something that I've worked on as a principal and now as director is not only a whole child approach to education, but a whole community approach to education. And I'm wondering if that's what we mean by whole systems. The most success I have seen when it comes to equity and addressing the needs of every individual is this whole community approach. And this includes supporting the social emotional learning, the mental health learning, the academic needs of our students, the rigor, and doing those at the same time. I am seeing educators feel like they have to choose one or the other, especially right now when there is such a need for mental health support and wellness and social emotional learning. The truth is that our most vulnerable, our most historically dismissed students need both at the very same time. And it is not about, Maslow before Bloom, and I've come a long way from that work myself. It is really about being able to do both and sustain both and engage the community in both. And for those folks that are jumping into the equity journey right now, welcome. We've been here for a while. I'm glad we have more people knowing what this is, but the work is closing the gap between knowing what the needs are and what equity means and actually doing the work. Successfully, a whole systems, whole community approach, in my opinion, is the best way to do it.
So I'm going to +1 what Rosa just shared and combine that with what Philip put in the chat in terms of the commentary. Thank you for your thoughts, Philip, on being a community builder as well. And I'll connect that back to our question around leadership skills, and that is that being that community builder, but recognizing whose future is it? It's our community's future, right? My first gut instinct would be to say, well, it's our kids, it's their future, it's not about us. But let's be real, we're also a very important part of that in that future, right? Our needs are, it's not just about the whole child, it's all about us as well as individuals, as adults, and our own wellness. And so to us, at Future Ready, our next webinar is on prioritizing the health and wellness of staff and students and making sure that we're not leaving ourselves out in that process. But for me, that word that best describes that would also be community, to build on what Philip and Rosa just shared.
Fantastic. We are, as usually happens, running out of time very quickly. So rather than giving you each 1 minute just to wrap up this, we're going to give you a brief time to make one statement or one thing that people should take away from this webinar. Rosa?
Oh my goodness, leadership matters more than ever. I know we talk about it, we tweet about it, we post about it, but actually doing what I like to refer as these 4 really important things when it comes to leadership and change, and that is acknowledging the issues that we have, coming to terms with that, and then actually declaring that we're going to do something about it, and declaring our solidarity, and also included with that is disrupting it. So start creating those changes and having conversations with all the partners in learning in your organization. And then finally, investing. Talk about it with money, human resources, fiscal resources, investments in our community and our students, collaboration with partners. So going beyond just saying, hey, we have this issue, let's do it different. Acknowledge, declare, disrupt, invest. Those are my recommendations.
Leadership matters. Adam?
I'm just going to try to answer that one of those questions that were in the chat, the last question, with my action. I'm going to take it with 3 letters, the acronym that I use. When it comes to technology, access, make sure as leaders, your students, staff, parents have access. C, connectivity. You want to make sure that have high-speed connectivity to do these tasks and things that are out there. And the T is task. So ACT, A-C-T, access, connectivity, and task. We want to make sure those tasks are aligned and all students are given equitable and equal access to those tasks. As oftentimes our students of color, our students are put in these drill and kill programs, and they don't get the ability to do some of those high tasks, those high technology tasks. And so they fall further behind their peers that are given those creativity tasks, those coding activities, those science integrated tasks with technology. Because they're stuck on, no disrespect to any product out there, those I learned, I love, ABC, this or that. They're stuck on those things, and they're not doing the code.org. They're not doing the Bloxels, all those fun things. So we have to think about the access to technology, the connectivity, and the task. So really look at your curriculum as a leader and see if you're meeting those 3 components and really meeting the needs of not only your students, but your community, and you're putting out students that can be productive members of society moving forward.
Sanae?
I'm going to say it's important to prepare, and knowing that there's another crisis around the corner. You have to evaluate your current organization, evaluate your systems, what's not working. And if it's not working right now, then work on that. How can we improve so that we're ready the next time something comes our way? Being that problem finder, not a problem solver. Problem solvers react to when a problem has already occurred, but the problem finder looks for opportunities to improve and to get better. And so I think that preparation piece is really important. And when you're evaluating your systems, look at your practices and the actions that you're putting in place. Every system is designed to get the results that it's getting. So if you don't like what you're getting, then you need to check and work on your systems.
Yeah, and people sometimes forget that it's people that make the systems. Okay. Tom?
Yeah, so each of them brought these, beautiful acronyms to the webinar, which I'm not going to be doing in my short time frame closing. I loved all of those. I loved all of those connections. I recently saw an image, and I had seen it before, but I stared at it a little bit longer this time. And on the left side, it said who wants change? And it shows this huge crowded room with everybody's hands up. And then on the other side, it says, who wants to lead change? And there's nobody in line. The work that we're talking about is incredibly hard. It's challenging, literal scars from it moving forward. If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. That notion that that part of the highway, there's not a whole lot of traffic moving forward there, but I have so much hope because of the greatness that is happening, because of the work of 3 of the people that you see right here and many like them across the country that are doing incredible things for kids. And so my action would be, it's our only opportunity for each of these children to get it right. So we have to continue to move forward. We have to be action oriented. But going back to my last response, also taking care of yourself in this process. The people that I know, like Sanae, like Rosa, like Adam, have such servant hearts, and it's easy to run over ourselves in this process. And it's not just investing in our systems and other people, it's also investing in our own selves in that process as well. So the work I know is ridiculously hard, but I also know that the kids that we serve, the families and the communities that we serve are absolutely worth it. So moving forward, let's get it done. And so thank you on behalf of Future Ready Schools to BTS Spark and the team here as well for the partnership in this webinar. We appreciate that as well. And so Sean, thank you, and back over to you.
Fantastic. And again, we could have probably gone on for another hour discussing these things. What we would do at BTS Spark as well is we do engage. Really what our DNA is developing the next generation of education leaders. And it's focused around a lot of the mindsets and skills that were discussed today as well. We base everything on our 33 mindsets that you've probably seen before. And when we're talking about leading change, We're probably talking about mindsets to do with engaging others and personal resilience, leading in uncertainty, challenging the way things are done. But all of these mindsets and skills that will be needed not only today, but are definitely going to be needed into the future as well. If anyone's curious, you are more than welcome at any time to contact us. The generic email is spark@bts.com, or our website's there. These recordings do go up onto our YouTube channel. So the same URL that we showed before with our futurists and thought leaders, you can see this recording probably in a couple of days. And for those who registered, you'll get an email alert saying it as well. Again, didn't fail to keep the conversation going. This crew from All for Ed and Future Ready Schools, I wanted to thank Tom and Sarnay and Adam and Rosa for this engaging conversation. And also thank you for tuning in. Thanks very much, everybody.